Man's best friend can sometimes turn deadly, but not always out of aggression. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying final moments of Stephin Pereira. Welcome to Final Affliction. Stephin Pereira was a medical transcriptionist and an animal lover. She lived in the rural village of Enchutengu, located in the Tiruvananthapuram district of the Indian state of Kerala. There had been calls of concern for the number of stray dogs that were now living in and around the local communities. Some people had been bitten by them, and they were worried not just about the dog's aggression, but also about the spread of disease. Although they were becoming a problem, nothing was being done about them. But for Stephan, they weren't seen as a problem. She could see the goodness in their eyes and the sadness as they struggled to survive in the harsh rural streets. Every day, Stephan would bring them scraps of food. Any leftovers she had or could find, she would gather up and take to the stray dogs. It gave her great pleasure knowing that she was helping them in some small way, even if it was just ensuring they had full bellies for that night. She was a kind-hearted soul who worked extremely hard in her job. She wasn't married and had no children, and so she divided her time between working and feeding the stray dogs near her home. Nobody thought anything of Stephan's habit of feeding the stray dogs. She wasn't harming anyone by doing it. But the other locals were often nervous of the strays, and they were right to be. It was true that some of them carried disease, and some of them carried one of the most deadly diseases, rabies. There are thought to be around 62 million stray dogs in India. The country has the highest rate of human rabies in the world, largely due to the huge numbers of stray dogs that transmit the disease to people. It is thought that there are around 20,000 human deaths from rabies in India every year, which is more than a third of the global total. One day, as Stephan was heading to the spot where she fed the dogs, one of them trotted over to her. It was acting differently. It was cagey. There was a slight foaming at the mouth. There were lots of dogs, all with different characters that Stephan had come to know. Some were timid and hesitated before tucking in. Others were bold and dominant, pushing the others out of the way when the scraps were thrown in front of them. This time, when Stephan bent down to place one of the many bowls of food on the ground, the strange dog lunged forwards, scrabbling to get at the food. One of its paws landed on Stephan's hand, and its claw scratched her. She instinctively drew her hand back and inspected it. The scratch had broken through the skin. It was bleeding, but it was small. Stephan thought nothing of it and walked back to her house and washed the cut. But a deadly disease was taking hold of Stephan. It was coursing through her bloodstream and spreading throughout her body. She needed urgent medical attention if she was to stand any chance of surviving. At first, Stephan didn't feel anything. As the days and weeks passed by, she started to feel ill. It began as a flu-like illness. Then the scratch on her hand began tingling. But still, Stephan dismissed it. She was too busy with work and family life to be concerned about her own welfare. She left her house and made her way to her family home in Enchutengu, where her brother Charles had fallen ill. She visited him in the medical clinic, and it was there that the doctors noticed that she wasn't looking well and was behaving strangely. The doctors took her to one side and questioned her. It was only then that Stephan admitted that she had been scratched by a stray dog. It was such a small scratch that it hadn't concerned her, but the doctors knew better. They managed to convince Stephan that she needed medical treatment, and she finally agreed. She was rushed through for emergency treatment, but once rabies symptoms start to show, the disease is almost always fatal. It was a long, slow, and painful death for the kind-hearted Stephan. The disease began affecting her cerebral function, and she began hallucinating and developed a fear of water, anxiety, agitation, a difficulty swallowing, and involuntary muscle movements are also common with rabies victims as the disease takes hold. Just days after Stephan was admitted to the hospital, she died from the disease, leaving behind 3 siblings. Stephan was 49 years old, and she wasn't the only to die from rabies in Tiruvananthapuram Medical College that week. Just 3 days earlier, a man named Mohammed Rafi, who was 48 years old, had passed away. He had come to the hospital days after being treated for rabies at another clinic. He too had complained of the same flu-like symptoms, but his death was unexpected. Mohammed had been working as a tapping worker in a rubber tree plantation. As he was making an incision in one of the trees, a wild cat suddenly jumped on him from the branches and bit his face. He knew the dangers of being bitten by a wild animal and sought medical advice right away. He was administered the rabies vaccine and sent on his way. But a couple of weeks later, he began to show signs of having contracted rabies. He was admitted to Peripoli Medical College and then 2 days later to Tiruvananthapuram Medical College, where Stephan had been treated. But then it was 3 weeks after the wild cat bite, and Mohammed was deteriorating fast. He died a few days later. Medical professionals were surprised that the vaccine hadn't worked for Mohammed. To die from rabies after timely administration of a vaccine is considered rare. There had also been 6 other people who had succumbed to rabies the year before, having received the vaccine shortly after being bitten. Following these deaths, the government appointed an expert committee to determine the effectiveness of the vaccines they were using. The vaccines were deemed good, but with nearly all of the cases, the infected bites had been near the head and had therefore affected the brain rapidly. It seemed that the vaccine was useless if the victim had been bitten deeply and near the head. But rabies isn't the only thing that Indians are concerned about when it comes to their stray dogs. Vicious attacks are becoming more common. Some 7 million Indians are bitten by stray dogs every year, and some of those attacks are proving deadly. In Rajasthan, 2 stray dogs entered a hospital ward and killed a 1-month-old baby whilst his mother slept. The incident shocked people. Then, only days later, a 7-year-old boy was mauled to death while he played outside his home in Uttar Pradesh. Recently, an attack on a 4-year-old boy that was caught on CCTV and then shared on social media as he was mauled to death by a pack of dogs just yards away from his father sparked the debate about what to do with India's dogs. They become more aggressive at night, prowling the streets in large packs as the heat from the day dissipates and they become more active. They often chase people away who enter their territory. Although there have been calls for a cull, with 80% of Indians being Hindu and therefore respecting and protecting all living things, this has never come to fruition. India's Animal Welfare Board suggests that stray dogs should be sterilized so they can't reproduce, and vaccinations rolled out to stop the spread of diseases like rabies. But the costs and practicalities of achieving this throughout India's urban and rural communities is prohibitive. It seems India has a real problem in its hands. It seems like more people like Stephin Pereira will meet the same terrifying final affliction.